What if the most talked about wedding of the decade exists not as a confirmed event, but as a vision so vivid that millions can already see it in their minds? If you are still watching, subscribe. Let's get the story started as the world of your favorite celebrity unfolds.
Stay tuned.
The image begins with a gown. A gown whispered about in numbers that sound almost mythical. $500,000. Hand-stitched lace. Silk that catches light like morning mist. A silhouette designed not just to be worn, but to be remembered. In the imagination of fans, it is the kind of dress that does not simply enter a room, but changes the air within it. And at the center of this vision stands song Hye Kyo, long regarded as a symbol of grace in Korean entertainment. Her presence alone has defined eras of drama, beauty, and poise. The idea of her in a wedding gown of such magnitude feels, to many, like the natural culmination of a fairy tale they have followed for years. Then, beside her in this imagined scene, stands Lee Min-ho, a leading man whose name carries global recognition, whose roles have shaped the rise of Korean dramas across continents. Calm, composed, cinematic even in stillness. The pairing of these two figures feels to fans less like gossip and more like destiny written in the language of pop culture. But before reality and rumor are confused, it is important to understand what truly fuels this story. There has been no public confirmation of a wedding between Song Hye Kyo and Lee Min-ho. No official announcement. No release ceremony photos. No agency statements declaring such a union. What exists instead is a powerful narrative created by admiration, imagination, and the emotional history audiences have with these stars. And that narrative is fascinating in its own right, because the idea of a wedding of the decade says more about cultural longing than about celebrity news. Picture the scene fans describe when they talk about it. A private venue tucked away from city noise. Perhaps a garden where light filters softly through tall trees. Perhaps a historic hall overlooking calm waters. The guest list filled with industry legends, longtime friends, and collaborators who shared chapters of their journeys. Cameras kept at a respectful distance. Security tight, not out of secrecy alone, but to preserve intimacy. The gown becomes the centerpiece of discussion. People imagine delicate embroidery representing phases of life. Some say the design would be minimalist and elegant, reflecting Song Hye Kyo's well-known preference for understated beauty. Others imagine a dramatic train stretching like a red carpet behind her, turning each step into a moment suspended in time. Fashion analysts, in these fan-driven scenarios, would later dissect the dress for symbolism, the choice of designer, the cultural influences, the message it sends about maturity and identity. A gown at that level is never just fabric. It becomes a statement. Then comes the imagined atmosphere.
Soft music.
Not a performance, but a melody that allows silence to feel meaningful. The kind of silence where guests reflect on how far two lives have traveled. Two careers built under relentless public gaze. Two individuals who understand fame's brightness and its shadows. In these visions, Lee Min-ho is described as steady, attentive, quietly smiling rather than dramatically expressive. The kind of presence that suggests grounding rather than spectacle. Fans often say this imagined dynamic is what makes the fantasy feel believable to them. Not fireworks, but calm. Why do people build such detailed pictures? Because these stars have been part of their lives for years. Viewers grew up watching their dramas, associating their faces with love stories, heartbreak arcs, and unforgettable lines. When audiences invest emotionally for that long, they naturally hope the people behind the characters find happiness too. This is not delusion. It is the human tendency to connect stories to real life. The rumored $500,000 gown becomes a symbol in that dream. Not of wealth, but of significance. A way of saying this moment would be historic, memorable, larger than ordinary milestones. Yet the real story may be quieter and more meaningful. Both Song Hye Kyo and Lee Min-ho are known for protecting their private lives. They share their work generously with the public, but their personal chapters are carefully guarded. That boundary is part of their longevity, part of how they remain respected in an industry that often rewards oversharing. So the wedding of the decade, as it exists now, lives mostly in the hearts of fans and the language of headlines designed to capture attention. It is a cultural daydream, a collective what if. And there is something poetic about that, because it shows how deeply people still believe in romance, in lasting connection, in the idea that two admired figures could find peace beyond the spotlight. In a fast, noisy world, that hope feels comforting. If one day either of them chooses marriage, it may look nothing like the imagined spectacle. It may be smaller, quieter, more personal. Real-life joy often is. But the fascination itself tells a story. It tells of two stars whose images carry warmth and credibility. Two careers that made audiences feel something real. Two individuals people genuinely wish happiness for, even if from afar. So perhaps the biggest revelation is not about a gown or a ceremony. It is about how powerful storytelling remains. How the legacy of on-screen romance can spill into real-world hopes. How admiration can turn ordinary possibilities into legendary narratives. The wedding of the decade, for now, is a beautiful idea rather than a historical event. And maybe that is why it shines so brightly. Because sometimes the stories people imagine reveal more about the heart than the headlines ever could. And as the story drifts further into the public imagination, it begins to take on a life of its own. Consider how modern legends are formed. Not in ancient books or whispered folklore, but in comment sections, fan edits, late-night discussions, and the quiet moments when someone replays a favorite drama scene and wonders about the people behind the characters. In this age, mythology is built from media fragments and emotion. The imagined wedding becomes a canvas where millions paint their own meanings. Some see it as the union of two eras of Korean drama excellence. Song Hye Kyo, whose performances often carry emotional precision and quiet strength. Lee Min-ho, whose roles have embodied charisma and sweeping romance. To fans, a symbolic pairing of such figures feels like the closing scene of a long-running series they never wanted to end. In this unfolding narrative, every detail gains significance. The flowers are not just decorations, but symbols of new beginnings. White blooms for sincerity. Soft pastel tones for calm. Even the season becomes a topic of debate. A spring wedding to reflect renewal. An autumn ceremony to mirror maturity and reflection. Each imagined choice reveals how deeply audiences project meaning onto moments that may never have happened. Yet behind the fantasy stands a deeper truth about celebrity and distance. Fame creates familiarity without access. People feel they know these stars because they have cried with their characters and celebrated their on-screen victories. But the real individuals live beyond scripts and camera angles. Their most important decisions unfold far from the noise. This contrast is what makes the myth so compelling. The public sees the polished image, the composed smiles at press conferences, the elegance on red carpets. But the private world contains ordinary routines, personal growth, quiet struggles, and relationships that do not need an audience to be real. In a way, the fascination with a grand wedding reflects a universal desire to see stories resolve beautifully. Audiences crave narrative closure. They want arcs to conclude with joy. It mirrors the structure of the dramas people love, where emotional journeys lead to meaningful destinations. But real life rarely follows screenplay timing. Real happiness is not measured by gown prices or headline impact. It is found in compatibility, trust, timing, and personal readiness. The elements that never trend, yet matter the most. Still, the legend persists because it is comforting. It allows people to believe that grace meets stability, that experience meets understanding, that two lives shaped by intense public attention could find calm in each other. Even as speculation, it offers a hopeful image in a world often crowded with difficult news. And perhaps that is why these stories endure. They're less about two specific celebrities and more about what they represent. Enduring charm. Professional dedication. The idea that maturity can still carry romance. That life after fame's early storms can hold serenity. If someday either star walks down a wedding aisle, whether with each other or with someone entirely unexpected, the real moment will likely be quieter than the legend. And that quiet may be its greatest beauty. Because the most meaningful milestones are not always the loudest. They're the ones lived fully rather than performed. So the tale of a stunning gown and a wedding of the decade continues to float through fan communities like a soft melody. Not a confirmed chapter, but a shared dream. Not a documented event, but a reflection of admiration. And in the end, maybe that is the final cinematic note. Two stars who inspired millions through fiction have also inspired hope through the simple possibility of happiness. The camera may never capture such a wedding. The headlines may never become history. But the story reveals something timeless about the audience. People still believe in beautiful endings. People still root for love. And sometimes, the stories we imagine say as much about us as they do about the stars we admire. The screen fades to black, not with a scandal or a reveal, but with a quiet understanding. Some legends are meant to live in the heart, not the record books.